everyone. Good Monday to all of you. It is hashtag Malkin Live, and I had a very, very busy weekend along with, I don't know, it could have been upwards or if not more than 1,000 Colorado freedom fighters, activists, family members, parents. It was a glorious sight yesterday on the steps of the Capitol. And we were all there to oppose a bill that is currently being heard before the Colorado State Legislature. It's called SB 163. And I know I got a national audience out there, as well as many Coloradans who have not been paying attention to what's going on. And this, of course, has been something I've been warning about on many policy fronts, that the chaos that's ensued in the aftermath of both the pandemic as well as the riots and the Floyd protests has created a perfect climate for so many opportunists out there who are trying to ram through their agenda items with little to no opposition from the grassroots. But that's not the case with SB 163, which has to do with eliminating a religious and philosophical exemption for mandatory school vaccines. The way I see this, especially given if many of you followed a column that I published a couple of weeks ago on the contact tracing regime and the racket, which got a foothold in Texas, but of course is taking place all across the country. It's not only exploiting the pandemic for data mining, but it also is laying the groundwork for making the COVID vaccine mandatory as a requirement to attend school. With all that said, I'm going to bring in Robin Sharon, who is a Colorado lawyer and medical freedom advocate. Hey, Robin.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. And Holly Calvert, who is a certified patient advocate and a certified parent activist for one of the groups that has done so much to raise awareness, educate, and lobby and raise hell at the Denver Capitol, Concerned Colorado. Hey, Holly.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you both. It was an incredible day. And Holly, I'm going to start with you because I want you to give sort of like the view from 30,000 feet about this bill, about what's really going on, and then a sense of the unfolding of this battle over the last several months.
Okay, so we knew that this fight was coming starting last year when we fought 1312, a similar bill. They promised that they would bring it back harder and stronger, and they did. But this year they ran it through the Senate, and they had reasons to do that, strategic reasons. They thought it'd be easier to pass if they passed it through the Senate first. So this is SB 163, Senate bill, which a lot of people don't realize. So it already went through and passed the Senate committee in February and the full Senate, where all the Democrats voted yes and all the Republicans, except for Kevin Priola, voted no. Now we're in the House. So yesterday was the House committee where it passed. Democrats voting yes, Republicans voting no, Republicans fiercely defending medical freedom and our religious rights and our constitutional rights, while the Democrats are hellbent on suppressing people and getting this data tracking. This bill is actually about data tracking. They want our kids' names, information, addresses, phone numbers, so that they can harass us with our own tax money. They can say, okay, your kid is missing one vaccine. We are going to send you letters over and over, phone calls over and over, trying to get you to do it. So it's about pressure and coercion.
Yeah, absolutely. Robin, can you explain for people what the current opt-in or opt-out process is for families, whether they have religious or philosophical or medical reasons for not submitting to mandatory school vaccines?
So the current state in Colorado is that there's an exemption online that you can download, and it will function as your religious or your personal belief exemption. The parent downloads it, they sign it, they turn it in. Up until 2014, there was really no rules around how often you had to do that. Sometimes the exemption would follow the child all through school. So in 2014, they had a different bill, HB 1288, that but most of it got gutted on the Senate floor. It was a little bit similar to this in a way, where they wanted to take away your right to use the form, send you to a doctor for re-education, or have you do an online module. All of that got gutted. But what did pass is that you had to turn the form in annually. So that's the situation in Colorado. You download your form, you turn it in every single year. This is done under the guise of equal effort, is what they're trying to say. And if you want to talk about equal effort, when you talk about equal effort in passing legislation, look at what happened yesterday, Michelle. Where were the counter protesters? There was absolutely nobody there. They brought in a dozen people wearing face masks to testify, and that was it. And you probably had, while you were speaking and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. were speaking, probably 1,500 people out there. Where's the equal effort in the legislative process? Because we just blew them out of the water yesterday. So this is their argument, is that they want equal effort for a parent to have to go in and see a doctor, just like a parent would take a kid into a doctor to get vaccinations, but this isn't really the case. As you heard yesterday, did you hear that doctor testify that she did not receive an education in vaccine ingredients, vaccine reactions, the risk of vaccination? She said, we learned about the diseases, we learned the schedule, and we learned how to inject one. And she said it would be a burden on healthcare providers in Colorado if this bill was passed, because they are not qualified to teach parents like us anything about vaccines. When it comes to this, we're the experts.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I did find that extraordinary, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. took the time, and, this is a busy, important man, to fly here and try and do the educational work. I mean, there was a meeting before the hearing with one of the Democrats who at least is open-minded enough to listen. But it's like, it's taken, each of us years of dedication and vigilance and research, motivated by our love of our children and protecting our children's safety. But, to try and give, a 10 or 15 or 20 minute seminar to these legislators who have so much power over us. I alluded to it, and many of the speakers did yesterday before the hearing, the underhanded way in which that hearing was scheduled. Holly, can you talk about that? Because again, we've got a lot of people who are just joining and learning about this for the first time.
Yes, a lot goes on behind the scenes. All of the Democrat legislators in the House and the Senate have been fully informed over the last 2 years about all vaccine ingredients, all risks. They've been informed by multiple Colorado medical freedom groups many times, and they ignore the emails, they ignore the phone calls. They secretly, behind the scenes, tell us, we agree with you, but we are not allowed to vote with you. Okay, so we already know that's going on. We know there's pressure. We know there's intimidation in the Democratic Party coming from the top down, it seems. So a lot of them are afraid to speak out. When COVID happened, it kind of put everything on the back burner. We testified in February in the Senate, it passed, and then everything came to a screeching halt. More and more people started questioning vaccines, it seems. And I saw a lot of people saying, I'm never getting a COVID vaccine. But what this bill does is it hands over legislative authority from the Colorado legislature over to CDPHE for the future. So CDPHE would get to choose which vaccines get added. So they designed this for a reason. They know exactly what they're doing because they've watched how this is played out in other states. This bill was designed to increase vaccination exemption rates because all of the parents in Colorado who think that their children are up to date on vaccines are going to be shocked when Colorado adopts ACIP guidelines, adding 3 to 5 doses of vaccines and possibly in the future a COVID vaccine. So all these parents are going to say, I don't want another MMR. My kids already were vaccinated. So they're going to get exemptions. Exemptions will skyrocket. The legislature will come back and say, because of that, all exemptions need to be removed. That's their play.
Yes.
So what they did Yeah, so what they did is they didn't let anybody know that this was a bill they were going to bring back. The Speaker of the House said everything needs to be fast, friendly, and free. This is none of those things. So 3 days ago, they presented this bill, put it on a Sunday, which in my understanding has never before happened.
Yeah.
As far as I know, the Colorado legislature, that's unheard of. Unless it's happened in extreme circumstances that I'm not aware of. You don't do that. Well, they were hoping with all the riots and the violence that we wouldn't show up, but we put it together in 3 days and we pulled off an enormous rally.
Yeah, it was a huge show of force. And just so people, we're all immersed in the acronyms, but CDPHE is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. ACIP is the panel. I can't remember what the acronym means. Do you, Robin? It's the immunizational panel.
Advisory committee.
Yeah, right. The federal panel that recommends what's going to go on the schedule. And you're right. I also heard that this was unprecedented, which the explanations for it were disingenuous. Again, before the hearing, there was one Democrat who rationalized that, oh, in fact, it's because all of these other people are coming to the Capitol that we wanted to encourage public input. I mean, like, really? You're telling me that to my face?
Just days after the Colorado governor came on and said, everybody needs to stay at home. You're still not safe to go out, but we're going to call a hearing down amidst riots that turned violent, that left bullet holes in the Capitol, graffiti everywhere, but stay home, wear a mask. But we're going to call the most controversial hearing ever on a Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah. Robin, I wanted to talk about the lack of the counter people, right? And we mentioned that there are half a dozen, not more than a dozen astroturfed parents. So one of the lead pharma lobbyists is a woman named Sundari Croft. And, this is I think it's a good peek into how actually things work. Do you know anything about her? And can you talk about their presence throughout this battle?
Yes, Sundari and I go back several years. I was asked to appear on a Channel 9 short debate, like a 3-minute debate with her back in 2014. She didn't perform very well. She was not happy with it. And ultimately her bill got gutted, although she tried to repackage it as a success because of the data tracking component of it that resulted in Colorado schools putting their exemption rates online. So all of that data is currently available online. So she goes through Facebook account. She tries to join every mother group in Denver, especially, so that then she can go troll for people to come and testify how passionately they care about this bill. But this isn't a bill that they even know about. It's not an issue that they care about. So she goes around begging people to show up to testify, because in the past, she has shown up with 3, Holly, do you remember in 2014, maybe 3 mothers killed, something like that? And
yes,
of course,
in 2014, there was probably 35 to 40 of us testifying, and maybe 3 to 5 of them.
Plus the same doctor from Children's Hospital who is still hanging on, showing up and testifying at everything. Yeah, and so she watched that, and then she watched us grow. And then I think in the last hearing that happened, our side testified till maybe 4 a.m, something like that. But her side was in pretty quickly. They were done in an hour or so. So she keeps seeing this unequal show. And so now she'll go trolling for strangers that are not part of her group, not part of her movement, are not passionate about this. But she'll go to the neighborhoods, the wealthier neighborhoods in Stapleton, which is ironic, right? Because everyone wants to say that this is a wealthy woman's problem.
Right.
That not being happy with the vaccination schedule is a white mother issue. But Sundari will go troll Stapleton, which was one of not only wealthiest zip codes in Denver, but it's one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. Please, can someone show up and testify for us? Please contact me. So she's got these rich white women who live in like $500,000 houses that would sell for like $100,000 anywhere else. Like, people pay for the privilege of just living in Stapleton, and that's where she got these people to show up yesterday wearing masks to troll them on through. But I want to make a point though. About how in 2014 they passed the data tracking and the publication on the health department for every school. So that's on there now. one of the key pieces of this bill requires schools to provide that data directly to every student. And their argument is like, well, it's already available. So what's the problem with giving it to kids? Well, okay, well, let's look at the other side of that coin. If it's already available, why are you giving it to children? And this is what I testified to yesterday. If you're going to give this to children, right? So it will have the school, it'll have the total enrollment, it will have the number of children on exemptions, the number of children out of compliance, right? The percentage rates, the exact vaccines that they're not getting, that sort of thing. So when HPV is mandated, which it will be, you'll be able to see what kids don't get HPV. The vaccine. This type of thing is already happening across America, where teens are kind of talking to each other about, did you get this vaccine? Because they're all convinced they're going to die of cancer now if they don't get a Gardasil vaccine. And what is going to happen is in children's hands, right? There's no age limitation like, oh, we're not going to give this to first graders or third graders. Nothing. It just says students in their hands. This is going to weaponize this data. And so you're going to have vaccinated kids who are being told our school, because of this bill, now has a 95% vaccination goal. And of course, there's no like stated reward or punishment or anything like that, because that'll be in the next phase, right? That'll be next time when they come back and they change this law. So this is setting the 95% threshold, giving the data to kids. And then the kids are going to say, oh, wait, there's 6 kids here or 15 kids here in this school, and they're keeping us from being vaccinated. And then they're going to start talking. Who is it? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? And then they're going to figure out who it is. And they're going to bully those kids. They're going to isolate those kids, exclude them. They're going to coerce them into going and getting vaccinated behind the parents' back. And if you think there's kids who aren't going to kill themselves over being treated this way at school, you've got another thing coming. Like this is a bill.
Yeah, that is so terrifying. And there was a young girl yesterday who spoke at the rally, who talked about that ostracism. It is so dangerous. And, you know, it is bad enough to think that kids will have access to this data. There was also someone who testified yesterday. Was it an El Paso County worker who was able to access, was it the CISS? Holly?
I missed that because I was outside at the rally.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Robin? She talked about how, so how she worked for the county, and you know, there was no safeguards, there was no walls, and she was able to look at, you know, PII, personally identifiable information. So they keep assuring us that all of this will remain aggregate, when in the real world, that is not what's happening. And I had mentioned in my testimony about the various lawsuits that are happening because third parties like Google are getting access to this data. And, you know, in violation of FERPA and HIPAA, which people just pretend doesn't exist anymore. And so, and again, just to spell this out, and either of you can take this, because I just want to make it clear. Currently, if you want to opt out, you fill out the form and give it to the school. And that data is still protected by FERPA, as I understand it. However, if you skip that step and force parents to submit that data directly to the State Department, you know, all privacy protections are out the window. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's why they designed it how they did. So a lot of your viewers might be asking the question, doesn't HIPAA protect this? No, HIPAA does not, because the way Colorado exemption law is written, it is protected under educational records within the school under the Federal Education Rights Privacy Act. So your vaccination records or exemptions are education materials. So like right now, I refuse to use a form because statute says a statement of exemption signed by one parent or guardian. So I write the date, my children's name, birthday, my children are exempt from the following vaccines, and I hand it directly to the school nurse. It stays in her file in that office. It does not go anywhere. The only thing the state can do currently is send someone in for an audit to make sure the file is there. They're not allowed to take my information. They're not allowed to take the kids' names, which vaccines they've had, which they've hadn't. So it's protected under FERPA. They wanted to get around this. So the way these lobbyists wrote this bill, because don't get these are lobbyists. We have CDPHE lobbyists. We have pharma lobbyists. They've been watching what's happened all over the country, and they want that data. So they want to remove our FERPA protection. HIPAA doesn't protect it either. They can do anything they want.
Robin?
What to add to that?
Yeah.
Just to the testimony yesterday about accessing the system, I wanted you to know this is not the first time that the legislature has heard this complaint. Not the first time. They have been hearing this for years, and they've heard it actually. Holly, do you remember the time that a data specialist came in and he said, let me break it down for you how simple it is for anyone to access this information, what a mess this is, the number of hacks that have happened across the nation and how this data has been accessed. It's not news to them. They don't care.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what happens from here on out. So the Senate had its hearings. Yesterday was the House. And is it going to the full House now? Is that where we're headed?
Correct.
Okay.
We thought that it would go to appropriations this morning, but that did not happen. It was announced this morning that there's 5 days left in the session. So my understanding is it needs to go through appropriations, which is a pretty quick thing. So it could happen tomorrow morning in a matter of minutes, and then go to the full House where it will be debated, and Republicans will oppose it and Democrats will try to push it through. And then if it's amended, it goes back to the full Senate and then to the governor. If it is not amended in the House, it goes straight out of the House to the governor to be signed.
And just to be clear, people need to attend this debate. As soon as we know this debate is happening, people need to be outside of those walls again with their drums, with their megaphones, with their sirens, chanting so that their voices are heard. So we need people to do it all over again very soon.
Yeah, well, it definitely requires eternal vigilance, and it was extraordinary to me. I've lived here 12 years now. I was here for, the early Tea Party days, that kind of grassroots effort. I've never seen anything like this, to be able to organize, at the drop of a hat. And I think, yes, absolutely, people will be there again. I think people need to know that the fight is not over, because after our hearing, after the rally, a lot of people who had just become initiated on this issue emailed me and said, oh, it looks like it's over. Even I had a House candidate say, oh, well, I guess, we're under the thumb of it. No, it's not over.
No, let's all just pray for Corona miracle. That's what I'm saying. Because who knows how many attitudes have been changed, right? Who knows? Yesterday, did you hear Bobby open his speech with a quote from an article that had just run in Colorado with, I believe, the committee chair saying, if we can't pass this vaccine bill during the pandemic, when can we pass it? Like, oh, no kidding. If you can't pass it in the middle of a pandemic on a Sunday at noon when churches just open and on 3 days' notice, and by replacing 5 of 7 Democrats on the committee, they removed 2 Black women and a transgender woman in order to get this passed yesterday, then when can you pass this bill?
Yeah.
So who knows how many attitudes have changed in this time, because vaccination, although vaccination has been on this climb since, the last 5-6 years, it's been on this climb of awareness, but it's massively spiked ever since the coronavirus shutdown has happened. People are really listening, paying attention. I've watched Bobby's Instagram go from about 155,000 followers. I don't even know. He's probably at 500,000 now. People are listening. So even though they could have just run this through the House, had they gotten this done in January, February, my money is on attitudes have changed and people are scared, because this will absolutely remove the stakeholder process. It's going to remove the legislatures. It currently is that if a vaccine is going to be added to a schedule in Colorado, it is a very long process. It begins with, I think, Holly, 30 legislators needing to come together and send a letter saying that this is our recommendation. It goes to a big stakeholder process and all of that. So even though the final process is held through the Board of Health, the Board of Health doesn't get to just willy-nilly add vaccines. And that's something that the lobbyists are tweeting about, and they're telling legislatures, oh, the Board of Health already has the power to do this. Well, no, that's not how it starts. It starts with the legislatures, and you're removing them from the process. You're going to be removing the stakeholders. Did you hear Kevin Jenkins yesterday? It was some of the most fiery testimony of the day. when he came in and he said, where are your stakeholders? Where's the Black community? Nobody here saw you. You weren't out talking to people, asking what my people thought about this. And he said, now that my community knows about this, I want you to know they are in staunch opposition to this. They do not want this bill. And he goes, and I know that because I'm out in those neighborhoods talking to people where lawmakers are uncomfortable. So I'm just bringing this message to you that we don't want this to happen. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping for a miracle this week.
Holly, you wanted to weigh in.
Something else that we forgot to talk about is they're using false narratives to push this bill in the first place.
Right.
You keep hearing Colorado has the lowest vaccination rates. Actually, we don't. And we brought this up several times. So last year in 2019, when Kyle Mullica decided he was going to bring forth an exemption removal bill that would have been 1312, we had hundreds of parents descend on the Capitol and have a meeting with him on 24 hours notice. And we explained all of this to him. And he was told, your data's wrong. You're saying that we have an 87% vaccination rate, and that's the lowest. What you're using is kindergarten data. The kindergarten data is problematic because children enter kindergarten between age 5 and 6. So what you're saying is that maybe they don't have all of their vaccines yet, but they will by the end of kindergarten. So they're using a low number on purpose to change the narrative. They've been informed several times. Last year, fighting 1312, we informed Kyle Mullica of this at that first meeting. Then we informed him again as we were fighting 1312. Every time we testified, NVIC, CHCA, other groups in Colorado have presented extremely accurate data directly from the CDPHE to these legislators, and they have it in their hands. They have the real numbers, and they keep repeating the same lies, even with their own data in front of them. We do not have the lowest rates.
Yeah,
Right.
that is such a great point too, Holly, because it's almost like most of the journalists here locally and statewide who have covered these hearings and covered the protests have some sort of copy paste, like prefab thing. And they just regurgitate the same thing too. Robin, is, you are immersed in social media. What is it going to take for reporters to do their job on this issue?
Oh, they're never going to do the work. I watched the best video the other day. So there is a new project called Project Vector, and it's funded by the state of New York. They're launching a tool to track all of the big leaders of the anti-vax movement, and they invited the media to take part. And so, of course, we had people embedded in it. And so they got this hour-long lecture, and it's a private link on YouTube. So as soon as it was over, we were all provided with this private link to go watch this hour-long discussion on these anti-vaccine leaders, which, of course, then we proceeded to share all over Facebook what they're saying about us. And what is so interesting is that at the end, he took questions from journalists. And there was no curiosity. There was no like need for real information or to have questions answered. The journalists wanted to know the same thing. They wanted to know, are they Russian bots? They wanted to know, where are they getting all of their funding? Aren't they really well funded by millions of dollars? And then my personal favorite, are there any anti-vaxxers that have changed their mind and now they're willing to get the COVID vaccine? I swear to you, those were the questions journalists asked. All they want to do is reaffirm their narrative. That's it. They don't care what the truth is. So no, we are the media now, Michelle.
That's exactly right. Amen, Robin. The thing that puzzles me is that, the journalism industry is filled with many women and many moms. And it is really hard for me to believe that there isn't at least a half dozen of them out there who have had, their own personal experiences, awakenings, encounters with the establishment medical system that would get them to at least open their minds or treat us fairly. That is what I don't understand. And there were some good ones. And Cheryl Atkinson, when she worked for CBS and was really, really making a huge difference at 60 Minutes. Well, now we know. That she was always challenging the powers that be, and CBS reaps in hundreds of millions of dollars from the pharma industry and advertising. And so they've done their best to relegate her to the sidelines. There's another reporter that I have had just horrible experiences with. I don't know if you know her. Her name's Brandy Zadroni.
Yeah.
Zadroni at NBC. Vicious. I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is why social media alternatives, why we're doing what we're doing. The fact that we had Highwire, live streaming the hearing yesterday and the protest, and many different voices on Facebook. And I wanted to pivot to this issue too. Of course, there's been a concerted campaign by all these Silicon Valley companies, Holly, to suppress us on their platforms. Have you had experience with that?
Oh, yes, I'm shadow banned daily. I have thousands and thousands of friends on Facebook, and I'll get a few people will see a post and I'll have to bump it. We definitely experience massive censorship on Facebook.
Yeah. Robin, same?
Yes and no. I think that a ton of censorship actually came with Facebook in September 2016. I think that I really personally felt that. What's happening right now, it doesn't really impact me as much. I don't know how I managed to plow through it, but we're plowing through it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, so since about probably 2011, our HHS had reached out to all media and asked them to stop giving us any coverage, right? It was the birth of the false equivalency argument. And so they wanted to just stop everything completely. Because I think after Jenny McCarthy came out, right, and there was a lot of balanced coverage back then. And so they wanted to put an end to that. And so our HHS, and how that's not a violation of the First Amendment is just beyond me.
Yeah.
Ask people, stop giving them coverage completely. So that's really the worst thing they can do, right, is ignore us. That's the worst thing. Enter Brandy. I have to say, Brandy, I love you. I know you're watching. I love Brandy. Brandy does not know how to put out a fire without calling attention nationwide to the fire. She doesn't know how to do it. So she's writing these articles, and NBC's putting them on their front page and all of this. Do you know how many Americans now, when Brandy writes an article to go after Katie Clopes, whose daughter died at 6 months old after receiving, I don't even know, I'm assuming 8 vaccines at once, right? And Katie watched slow death over a couple of days before her very eyes. And Katie woke up, and Katie is mad, and Katie is drawing attention to this. And Brandy wants to write an article about how the baby actually suffocated in Katie's bed, and the vaccines had nothing to do with it. Do you know how many parents in America read that article for the first time, thought, oh, vaccines cause SIDS? Like, this is the greatest gift. It really is. And my heart breaks for Katie. And of course, Katie, she's got conflicting opinions about all of this. She lost a child in all of this. So it's very difficult for her to celebrate Brandy in the way I celebrate her. Brandy cannot write an article attacking people when we have nowhere to go but up. So I am extraordinarily thankful for her just single-minded focus on attempting to destroy us, because the attention that she's giving us is something that we've been lacking for many years. So
right.
Keep going.
That is a great way to look at it strategically, Robin. She's providing the oxygen that had been choked off by smarter opponents. Right.
So
right.
That brings up liability. And I think a lot of your viewers might not understand how this is such a big deal with liability.
Yes.
Just to explain it, if a vaccine is on the childhood schedule, the CDC's childhood schedule, it is protected under the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which removed liability from drug companies for these products. Don't forget that they are products. They can be bad, right? Everybody makes products sometimes that are bad. But if you get a car seat that's bad, you can sue the manufacturer. Because of this act, if you get a vaccine that's bad, or a hot lot is what they call them, where it's like a bad batch that they admit to, you can't sue anybody if it's on the childhood schedule. So part of what the state of Colorado is doing with this bill, any vaccines that the CDPHE would add to the childhood schedule could be liability free when they're not already. So for instance, you'll see stuff on TV, like let's sue for this shingles vaccine, right?
Mhm.
You can sue for shingles injuries because it's not on the childhood list. So
Yeah.
there's a lot going on with that, where these drug companies don't ever want to be sued for any vaccine injury. So they'd like to get all the vaccines onto the childhood schedule, which will protect them from lawsuits.
That is such an important point. And so what does that mean for the COVID vaccine, Robin?
It means you're out of luck, and you're going to be out of luck no matter what, because the PrEP Act was passed. And so even if there was a vaccine that ends up not being given to children because it's too dangerous, it elicits too large of an immune response to children, just like with the Moderna trials, where you had Ian Hayden, who was in the Moderna NIAID trial, and who finally came out and said that his high-dose COVID vaccine, the experimental one, had made him sicker than he had ever been in his life. He was passing out. His girlfriend had to catch him. He was vomiting. The trial manager suggested that he call 911, all of this. And so that's not a vaccine that you would ever give to a child, right? Because if it's going to make an adult sick who weighs, let's say, 180 pounds, how's it going to go with a 6-month-old baby? And so if there is a COVID vaccine that for whatever reason is an adult vaccine, not given to children and not given to pregnant women, and actually, Holly, it doesn't have to be on the schedule. It just has to be traditionally given to pregnant women and children. If there is an adult version of the COVID vaccine, you won't be able to sue for it the way you can sue for the shingles vaccine. You won't, because the PrEP Act already protects it, because we're in a pandemic. So no matter what, no matter who you are, no matter what vaccine you take, every single coronavirus vaccine is already liability free. And honestly, I don't even know, Holly, do you know, are they going to be able to sue through the compensation program for COVID? I don't even know the answer.
And see, that's what it takes away. It opens up so many questions, because if we hand this authority over to the Board of Health and CDPHE, and we've been around these people, these are not people you want making these decisions for you. Trust me. Some of them you wouldn't even hire to mow your lawn. Okay?
Oh, God.
So giving them just authority, do whatever you want with the COVID, give it, do all this stuff, is just insanity.
Yeah. So again, to just go over fundamentals, because I think this is so important, explain for people more about how the compensation fund works.
Robin?
Mm-hmm. So the vaccine injury compensation program was passed with the intention, and part of it was a good intention. So NVIC, the National Vaccine Information Center, who was on our side, they had input during that process. They were stakeholders, Barbara Lowe Fisher. What has become of the program is completely bastardized. It's not what people signed on for in the 80s when this was being negotiated. The intention, because let's be honest, not everyone can afford a lawyer, and not all lawyers can afford to take cases on contingency. So there's a lot of people out there who could not sue over these horrific DPT, which is not a vaccine that's on the market in America anymore, but it's used worldwide. It's the most popular vaccine in the world, right? Horrible brain injuries happening to these kids. And so the intention was to give an opportunity for these families to get compensation, because if they can't afford a lawyer's hourly rate and they can't find a lawyer to take it on a contingency, then they're out of luck. And so, I mean, it is a good intention. And this number that people rattle off, right, $4 billion in compensation, obviously that's not a very big number. It's really not. What that does not account for are the, I think they're the annuities. There's payouts, and you only get them every year that your child is alive, because they are banking on your vaccine disabled child dying. And so they pay it out as an annuity. Those amounts are not even considered. They're not counted in the $4 billion. So that was the intention. But what happened at the same time is it would have been nice to have it both ways. It would have been nice to say, here's a fund for people who cannot hire a lawyer, but also if you can hire a lawyer, you're free to still sue, right? But that's not what happened. They removed the ability to sue, and then litigation actually on down the line made it even more restrictive for us. And so you hear people say, oh, you can sue for this little reason or this little reason, but that doesn't represent reality. In reality, courts are going to say, you're not going to be able to sue because that's what this compensation program exists for, right? And it was supposed to be speedy, expedited, non-confrontational, nothing. And instead, taxpayers are or not taxpayers, vaccine consumers are paying the 75-cent tax. So this is, it's called an excise tax. And so this is a tax put onto the vaccine by the manufacturer before it's ever sold. So every component of the vaccine has a 75-cent tax. So a DTaP vaccine is going to be diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis. That's going to be 3, right? So 75, 75, 75. People want to say it's one vaccine. Guess what? The government doesn't consider it to be one vaccine. It's 3 vaccines in just one needle. And so this fund has been built up through that. And now what has happened is because they began vaccinating children for the flu vaccine, then that brought protection for flu vaccine injuries into this childhood program. You know, it's supposed to be for children. And so people are getting these shoulder injuries and they're not getting super high compensation for it. But even if it's a $100,000 payout or a $50,000 payout, now you hear people who are on the other side of the issues from us say, oh, most of these are just shoulder injuries. Oh, yeah, not by, not by severity, certainly not. It's, you know, there's a ton of these. So the program has fallen apart. So you were using taxpayer money from vaccine consumers to pay other vaccine consumers, right? There's no expense for pharma. And then they're also using that money to pay government attorneys to fight these parents in an extraordinarily adversarial process and battle of the experts. This was never the intention of the program. The program needs to be reformed, but the problem with reforming this type of program is that pharma will put poison pills into it, right? It can always be worse. It's a horrible program. Even a few years ago, even New York Times used to write about how long it would take, right? Some cases are taking 5 years, 7 years, and people are just broken and destroyed by the end of it. They wish that they had never even begun it. And you don't see a lot of negative press about it anymore, but it is not what it was intended. It is a horrible process. I know several people who have been through it, and it absolutely destroyed them as families to go through it.
And they're already suffering. These parents that Robin's talking about, these parents have severely vaccine injured children. You're talking about a child who was perfectly fine, gets a DTaP vaccine in a wheelchair, drooling, loses all brain function, 200 seizures a day. Those parents sell their house, sell their car, sell everything they have. Both of them are staying home. One of them tries to get a job to support everybody. These are people who are under such extreme duress anyways. Do they have time to fight this system for payouts? No, most of them give up.
Right. And that's an intentionally rigged game by big moneyed interests. There's so many different categories of vaccine injury. There's the most explicit and acute ones. There's chronic ones. And, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has spoken so eloquently about pulling back the lens and looking at the generation of kids that my kids belong to and the panoply of illnesses and conditions that didn't exist when we were kids and we got, RFK Jr. always talks about getting 3, right? Maybe I got double that amount or what have you. But between the neuro conditions, autoimmune and allergies, and then the effect of mental health on all of this, Robin, you talked about the very, grave consequence of kids who might commit suicide if they are set upon by a mob of ill-informed teens. I mean, you cannot blame the teens in all of this. They are not the adults. They're not the ones who are supposed to be responsible for doing all the research and taking matters into their own hand and not just believing the experts because they're the experts. So I hope this isn't too personal, but it's always interesting to me. When I had my interview with RFK Jr. a couple of weeks ago, I talked about my own background, and I've been very public about this, about very gently questioning Hep B vaccine when my youngest son was 2 months old. Just going through that whole period and that whole experience, just it turned on a light. Was there a moment for you that, this is not something we'd willingly do, want to be smeared, want to be called all the names that we're called and dedicate all of this time to it. What was it for you?
Do you want to go first, Robin?
Holly.
I'll go first. So my story is My story's out there. If anybody wants to Google a story called "My Child is Vaccine Injured Just Like Yours," it's something that I have talked about a lot. So my background was in biology with a focus in human genetics. I believed in medicine. I believed in science, all of that. My child was vaccinated for Hep B at birth. He then received 8 injections, right? And so people don't realize that it's 8 vaccines in just a few needles, right? You've got the D, the P, the T, the pneumococcal, the Hib, the rotavirus, polio. I think that there's one more, right? People don't realize it's all of that, which is why they're heading toward the hexavalent vaccine right now, because they want to be able to say that it's just 1 injection and that that's less traumatic for a baby. Well, of course, 1 needle is less traumatic for a baby, but, or 2, I guess, because pneumococcal is not going to be mixed in there. Oh, Hib, that was the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be reduced down to 2 needle pokes and an oral vaccine, and like, yeah, that's less traumatic for the baby psychologically. But what is the trauma that's happening on the inside, right? It's probably worse because you've got this cocktail, and it's going to be a cocktail of aluminum adjuvants that have never been safety tested together, right? So there's various forms of aluminum that we have been using in vaccines since the 1930s, but then there is a manufacturing error that people don't know about that Merck created called AAHS, and I'm not even going to be able to like rattle off. It's amorphous aluminum something, hydroxysulfate. I don't remember what it is. And they used to mislabel their vaccines and call it a different kind of aluminum that had been around since the 1930s. And somebody went and analyzed the contents of the vial, I want to say in the 1990s, and alerted them, what is in this shot is not what you're labeling. And now we're all questioning, wait a minute, was the problem with the brain injuries the old wholesale DPT vaccine, or was it the adjuvant AAHS that was being used in it and was mislabeled? We're never going to know at all. It's completely bonkers. Michelle, what was your question? Take me back.
No, that you did answer it. It just what motivated you to get involved? Yeah, you did.
So, well, I mean, so my kid got them all, right? And so my kid got all 8 vaccines, and he had high-pitched screaming. He was in a deep slumber for several hours. I had a colicky kid. He never, ever used to sleep during the day. He would never have slept in a public place. You know, colicky moms know this. And he went into a deep sleep immediately before we even got him into the car. And then for several hours, I put him into bed. He didn't wake up. And when he woke up, it was a high-pitched scream. And that scream is called the neuro scream. It's called the DTaP scream. And you can read about this. And there's nurses in NICU units, and they know after vaccination, when they hear that scream, they're like, oh, that kid is going to end up having neurological problems later, because they can hear the damage as it's happening. And that happened to my kid. And I stayed up all night, waking him constantly to feed him, trying to make, scared to death of SIDS, stayed up all night researching vaccination. I put so much thought and research into his car seat and the paint on the walls of the nursery, and I did not research vaccination. And even when I began to research, I was still scared to tell the doctor no. It was the day before the 4-month appointment that I finally called and said, you know what, I'm going to need to postpone this. And the doctor pretended that he was okay. He was like, oh, I'm not a real stickler for the schedule. Yeah, that's okay. And I said, when he's stronger, we will come back to this. And in the meantime, the pediatrician was getting less and less and less patient. And this was as the AAP had begun to not only condone pediatricians kicking non-vax parents out of the practice, but they actually promote it, right? Articles started to come out like, maybe it is okay to leave people without a medical home. So by the 12-month appointment, and I came in, and by then I had read the Dr. Sears book, which it's very informative. It's not necessarily I would never suggest an alternate schedule to anybody, though. There's no such thing as a safe schedule. And I went in and I said that my concern was the aluminum. And of course, this idiot nurse is like, oh, we don't use vaccines with aluminum in them anymore. We use Sanofi.
Right.
And I said that I only wanted the Hib vaccine, right? Bacterial meningitis. This was important to me. I only wanted the Hib vaccine at 12 months. And instead they come in with a pentavalent vaccine, 5 vaccines in 1 needle. And by then I knew, and I said, I'm not signing off on that. And so then we decided, okay, well, I'll just do the pneumococcal, right? Because that's not mixed in with anything. They bring me the needle on a tray, and the doctor comes to me and says, it is stressing me out not to vaccinate your child. I think you're going to need to find a doctor to put up with this. And my mouth just dropped, right? You go into not fight or flight, because women don't really, like, for us, it's more like tend and befriend, right? Your mind is like, survive this incident without a conflict, right? And I'm shocked, and I'm holding a 1-year-old baby, and I'm crying. And the doctor says, do you still want this vaccine? And I was like, no. And he said, I am your child's only advocate.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, my child's only advocate took that baby out the door without that vaccine. And by then I was pregnant with my second, and that was it. I was like, how did I get kicked out at an appointment where I was there to vaccinate?
Yeah.
That's crazy. And so that was it.
Yeah. Very similar to mine. How about you?
Just to toss in, my child ended up with eczema that lasted 4 years and 12 allergies. 2 of them are deadly, and we've almost lost him to peanut anaphylaxis 5 times.
Yeah, peanut allergies, again, one of those things that just did not exist when we were kids.
No.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't mean to open anything if they don't, but Holly, how about you?
I have a multi-step story. Okay.
Yeah.
So as a child for myself, and a lot of this, it's like hindsight is 2020, right? So I didn't realize a lot of it for a long time.
Yeah.
But as a child, I had chronic severe ear infections immediately following vaccines that would last forever. I had tubes in my ears, and I had permanent hearing damage from it. And it was always the same thing, the high pitched scream, the encephalitis, the high fever, all of that. They tell you give Tylenol. We know that's now the most dangerous thing in the world to do. I'm very lucky I didn't suffer from that. So we had those sorts of things happen. And in the early 90s, my sister, she lost 30 pounds. She got really sick. All of a sudden, we go to the emergency room. They say she has type 1 diabetes. This was a time nobody knew what type 1 diabetes was. When I first started researching vaccines, my mom said, Holly, find out why. When we went into the hospital, I had 10 doctors and nurses say, are you sure she didn't just get a chickenpox vaccine? And my parents would say, well, why would you ask me that? Nobody knew this, right? This was the early 90s. Nobody knew. She did have booster shots 2 weeks before that. She did. They were just asking about the wrong vaccines. They said that week, dozens of kids the same age came in with acute onset type 1 diabetes.
Wow.
They had a hot lot. They call it a hot lot. Now we know they split up batches on purpose. So they'll have a package of 24 vaccines or whatever it is. They send 12 to one doctor's office and 12 to another so that you can't track the hot lot. Okay. So we didn't know at the time. So here she is, a lifelong pharma customer. So I'm a kid when all this is happening. This is one thing that happened. And then I'm in college, and I have 3 schnauzers, and I take them in for shots, and all 3 of them have reactions. Okay. The veterinarian says to me, they're allergic to the ingredients in vaccines no more. And I remember very clearly leaving going, there's no ingredients in vaccines. I remember thinking that. Now I keep the ingredient list handy on my phone at all times. I know better. So I was about 20 when this happened. Well, my one schnauzer, her face swelled up huge. They said, go to the grocery store and get Benadryl. It's just a common reaction. And I'm just going, and I didn't have kids yet. Then I'm in college biology class at Colorado State University, and this is going to get you guys. I didn't really have a clue yet what was going on, but someone in my class did, and she asked a question. And the response, it was about safety of vaccines and how we test. The response from my college biology professor at Colorado State University was, well, that's why we test them in third world countries, because if someone dies, at least it's not in America.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
That really was like my starting to put everything together. And I remember thinking the lie that keeps all this going. The government would never do that. And if they did, the news would tell us.
Yeah. Wow.
Then I was pregnant in 2009 with my oldest, and I bought a book, Judith DeCava's Vaccination Examining the Record. And I sat down and I read that book, and halfway through, I cried, and I could not believe what I was reading. And the fact that I was injected with aborted fetal cells, with babies who were killed on purpose. And I was injected with them, and I didn't have a choice. Where was my choice in that? That I have these cells of these babies who were murdered floating around in my body. And I start to read and I start to connect the type 1 diabetes, my sister's thyroid, dead. And then I look at all the autoimmune diseases caused by vaccination. And then I realize, my chronic ear infections. You know what? Me, my husband, and my sister-in-law all had those chronic ear infections after vaccination. I have 3 unvaccinated kids. We have never once had an ear infection. So I found out in time.
Yeah.
About that hotline, I wanted to say that any parent you're entitled to your medical records, and the medical records should be complete with the lot numbers of the vaccines that your child received. And if you have a child who reacted to a vaccine, go get your records. And if your doctor's office is not going to be cooperating, you let them know that you're going to be filing a HIPAA complaint, and they will be complying with you very shortly. So you get your total records, you can see the lot number, and you can go into VAERS, which is the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. You can put that lot number in and look and see, because only 1 to 10% of all reactions are reported to VAERS because nobody knows that it exists. And so you can go and you can look it up. And I looked up all of my son's lot numbers, and there's not a whole lot of reports except on one, the hepatitis B vaccine. There were 7 other kids in that database. And one of those children was a little girl, my son's age, and so many of her other lot numbers matched up to my son's lot numbers that I know that that was a little girl in the same practice. She was hurt 2 weeks before my son was vaccinated. She was so sick, she ended up intubated in the hospital for several days. Of course, there's no way to ever know who these people are. I can't connect with her, nothing. But my pediatrician, who invalidated my entire experience, told me that this didn't happen, told me that it was no big deal, and kicked me out for not continuing, knows damn well that he had a little baby at 2 months old 2 weeks before my son was hurt that got it far, far worse. So there's no doubt. And that was Merck's hepatitis B vaccine with that AAHS aluminum that Merck, they got hacked. When was it, Holly? 2017 or whatever? They got hacked. That vaccine disappeared from the market. They never publicly came out and said it or anything, but I'll tell you, it's coming back around. So that Vaxelis that's coming to the market,
that's the hexavalent,
not only is it going to have 2 different kinds of aluminum adjuvant that we've been using, but it's throwing in a 3rd kind of aluminum. It's bringing that Merck, because it's a collaboration, right? I think it's Sanofi-Merck collaboration. Right. Merck is contributing the Hep B portion to it, and it will be the same Hep B vaccine that injured my child and sent another from the same practice into the hospital to be intubated. So people need to wait.
And Vaxelis is going to be on the market in 2021. Yes. I'm just going to put a link here as well. I appreciate you two so much, because even in the less than an hour that we've spoken, I think that we have pierced one of the biggest, falsest narratives that's plied by Big Pharma and Big Pharma funded media. And that is somehow that the moms who are raising their voices, who are raising hell, who are at the forefront of this grassroots movement pushing back, are uninformed, hysterical, conspiracy theorists. I mean, the years of and a lot of it, of course, is life tuition that is hard won. I wouldn't have wanted to learn all that I've been forced to learn. And it comes from all of our personal experiences. And this was so powerful, what RFK Jr. has repeated in many interviews. He talked about it in the meeting before the hearing. He talked about it at the rally, and he directly confronted his own Democrat Party, which is so brave. And I wanted to strangle some of those members who I thought they were rude. I don't know about you all, but I just thought they were so rude and so intellectually arrogant when they know so little. But when he called them out and said, it's his party, the Democrat Party, that embraced the Me Too banner. You're supposed to believe women. Look, if you don't believe them right away because you need to verify, you should at least respect them. And the wealth of knowledge that the two of you have just shared, even in this less than an hour, I'm doing this. I appreciate it. So we do have a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to give each of you a chance to wrap up, mention anything that you haven't mentioned, and then sort of, again, drive the concrete message home on the next steps and what people need to do to fight back in Colorado. We'll go Holly and then Robin.
Okay, so I just want to close on informed consent. This is about informed consent. So you were just talking about the hexavalent vaccine. These parents that go in for vaccines, none of them are told this is a 6-in-1 vaccine. This is a 5-in-1. This is a 7-in-1. They think they're getting one shot. Sometimes their kids are getting 8 to 12, maybe even more shots in one sitting, and they are not told that. They do not have informed consent. So we fight for your choice to choose which vaccines you want, when you want, how you want, and your informed consent. With SB 168, we just need to keep an eye on it. We have 5 days left.
163. 163.
I'm so sorry. 163. We have 5 days left in the session, it sounds like. So we need to be down there. And all Coloradans, this affects every single person.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Holly. Robin?
And then I just want people to know how to become more involved and how to be a more empowered parent. I think that the strongest resource to start with is going to be the National Vaccine Information Center. They are incredibly accurate. Like, they're very careful with the information that they put out. Everything is fact checked to the hilt. They're never guilty of putting out any misinformation of any kind. So National Vaccine Information Center. Holly, you have a couple of groups to mention, so I'll let you do that. And then I was just going to throw in a fourth group, which is the Colorado Health Choice Alliance is another group. So Colorado has got several groups to help you find the one that resonates with you the most, and everybody works together. Everybody comes together at these things.
Yeah, and I'm with Concern Colorado. We're a multi-issue political group. So this is not our only issue. We're just interested in freedom candidates, freedom issues, anything that affects parents and families. And then we also have Medical Autonomy Colorado, and people can look that up and join it. Go to the website of both Medical Autonomy Colorado and Concern Colorado and sign up for emails.
Awesome. I'm going to flash that right now. Medical Autonomy Colorado, Concern Colorado, and then both of your Twitter feeds are must read. Make sure I have this right, at Health Mandate and at safe_effective.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, ladies. We're going to do this again, and hopefully it will be a victory interview panel on squashing SB 163. So keep up the great work, and thanks for inviting me to come yesterday. It was really one of the most memorable things that I've done in a quarter century, and it's very heartening. And there's a lot of black pilling going around, a lot of reasons for feeling gloomy, but I felt renewed yesterday. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right, take care, ladies.
Bye.